In the dark, fiery depths of hell, a terrifying figure stood, his body torn and twisted by the torments of the damned. This was Muhammad, the prophet, condemned to eternal suffering among the schismatics and heretics in the eighth circle of hell. His voice, though mangled by pain, rang out with a chilling warning. Then you, who will perhaps soon see the sun, tell Fra Dolcino, if he has no desire to join me here quickly, to provide himself with food lest when the snows besiege him, it bring the Novaries the victory that otherwise they would not find too easy. These words, spoken by a man suffering the ultimate punishment, were meant for a heretic living in the mountains of northern Italy. Fra Dolcino, a man who had once preached peace and poverty, was now on the run from the forces of the Catholic Church. Little did he know that his fate was already sealed by the divine judgment of Dante Alighieri, the great poet who had immortalized these lines in his epic work, The Divine Comedy. But who was Fra Dolcino, and why did he deserve such a dire warning from the depths of hell? In the early 1300s, the Italian Alps were a place of unrest. The Catholic Church, once a symbol of hope and salvation, had become a powerful and often corrupt institution. Many people, disillusioned by the wealth and corruption of the clergy, began to look for a purer form of Christianity. One such group was the Order of the Apostles, a sect that believed in living a life of absolute poverty and piety, just like the apostles of Jesus. The order was founded by a man named Gerard Segarelli, a simple peasant from Parma. One day, inspired by a divine vision, Segarelli decided to follow the teachings of Jesus and the apostles. He let his hair and beard grow long, dressed in a rough woolen habit, and began wandering the streets calling out, "Penitentiagite," a call to penance. His message resonated with many, and soon he had a following of both men and women who shared his ideals. For nearly 40 years, the Order of the Apostles grew and spread, even gaining the support of some prominent bishops. But as the movement gained strength, it also attracted the attention of the Church. The bishops and the popes saw the order as a threat to their authority, and began to crack down on the apostles. Segarelli was arrested, tried, and eventually burnt at the stake for heresy in the year 1300. The execution of Segarelli did not break the spirit of the order. Instead, it fueled the fire of rebellion. A new leader emerged from the ranks of the apostles, Fra Dolcino, a charismatic and visionary man from Novara. Dolcino saw the Church's corruption as a sign of the end times, and he believed that the true followers of Christ were meant to overthrow the corrupt hierarchy and establish a new, pure church. Dolcino's message was radical. He preached that the Church had strayed from its original mission and had become an agent of the Antichrist. He called for a violent revolution to cleanse the land of evil and establish a new order based on the principles of poverty, equality, and justice. His followers, known as the Dolcinites, were ready to fight for their beliefs. As the Church and the local authorities hunted down the apostles, Dolcino and his followers retreated to the mountains of Valsesia. There they prepared for the final battle. They believed that the end of the world was near, and that they were the chosen ones who would bring about the new age of peace and purity. But the forces of the Church were relentless. They sent armies to crush the rebellion, and the battles in the mountains were fierce and bloody. Despite their bravery and conviction, the apostles were outnumbered and outmatched. One by one, they fell to the swords and arrows of the crusaders. Dolcino, the once peaceful preacher, had become a leader of a desperate and doomed rebellion. The snows of winter trapped him and his followers in the mountains, and the end was near. The warning from hell, delivered through the words of Dante, was a grim prophecy of what was to come. In the final days, as the snows closed in and the enemy drew closer, Fra Dolcino prepared himself for the inevitable. He knew that his fate was sealed, but he also believed that his cause was just. The story of the Order of the Apostles, a tale of faith, rebellion, and ultimate sacrifice, would live on, preserved in the pages of one of the greatest works of literature in the Western world. Henry Charles Lee, an American historian, published a mammoth 3-volume work called A History of the Inquisition of the Middle Ages in 1887. Despite its age, Lee's work is still considered a key reference for studying the medieval Inquisition. This is partly because of the detailed examination of medieval laws and court processes, and the many documents he uncovered and included in his notes and appendices. However, Lee's work is not without bias. His strong dislike for the medieval church influenced his writing. making his portrayal of the Inquisition very negative. Lee saw the medieval church as a repressive force that stifled intellectual freedom and hunted down people for minor beliefs, all in the name of God. He believed the church allowed the rich to buy forgiveness for terrible crimes with just a few coins. Lee described the Inquisition as a cruel and unjust system, a standing mockery of justice, and the invention of demons. He blamed the Inquisition for much of the suffering and injustice in medieval society, calling it a road to hell. Lee also had a negative view of medieval people, describing them as superstitious, emotional, and uneducated. He thought they were easily influenced and lived in deep misery under the harsh rule of feudal lords and the church. This view colored his portrayal of the Inquisition and the people caught up in it, especially those accused of heresy. One example of Lee's bias is his treatment of the Order of Apostles, a religious group in the 13th and 14th centuries. Lee based his account on the writings of Salambin, a Franciscan friar, and Gui, an inquisitor. According to these sources, the leader of the order, Gerard Segarelli, was illiterate, uncultured, and stupid. Lee repeated these descriptions without questioning their accuracy. He also portrayed Segarelli as someone who had been rejected by the Franciscans, and then drifted aimlessly until he started his own movement. Lee saw Segarelli's actions as driven by a kind of group excitement, rather than genuine religious belief. Lee's account of the later leader, Fra Dolcino, is also heavily influenced by his sources. Dolcino is described as the illegitimate son of a priest, a charismatic figure whose followers were so devoted that they were willing to engage in violent acts. Lee's portrayal of Dolcino and his followers as violent rebels has been repeated by other historians, even though the original sources may have exaggerated these aspects to justify the Inquisition's harsh treatment of the group. Later historians like Gordon Leff, Marjorie Reeves, and Malcolm Lambert have continued to repeat Lee's biased account. Leff, for example, emphasized Segarelli's illiteracy and Dolcino's illegitimacy, dismissing the Order of Apostles as unimportant compared to other heretical groups. Reeves, in her study of medieval prophecy, accepted Salambin's negative portrayal of Segarelli and focused on Dolcino's ideas, but still reinforced the idea that the order's leaders were unsuitable or misguided. Even more recent works, like Eugen Weber's Apocalypses, repeat these biases. Weber described Dolcino as an extremist dropout from the spiritual Franciscans who preached the abolition of property and possibly marriage, without providing any evidence to support these claims. Weber's account, like Lee's, undermines the legitimacy of the order by suggesting that Dolcino's reform was a sham to satisfy his own desires. Lauro Martins, in his book Power and Imagination, also perpetuates the image of Segarelli as a lower-class enthusiast, dismissing him as one of many excitable men who responded to the social changes of the time. Martins implies that Segarelli's movement was spontaneous and unthinking, further obscuring the true nature of the order. However, Italian scholars like Raniero Orioli have challenged these long-held views. Orioli's research revealed that Dolcino's father was likely not a priest, but a member of a prominent family. Orioli also documented the order's membership and activities, providing a more balanced and accurate picture of the group. Other Italian historians, such as Corrado Mornese and Gustavo Buratti, have further refined our understanding of the Order of Apostles, moving away from the biased narratives of the past. Another common misperception of the Order of Apostles is that they were violent revolutionaries seeking to overthrow the social order. Many accounts, especially from the Franciscan and Dominican sources, describe Dolcino and his followers as violent and murderous, hunting down the rich and powerful. These portrayals served the Inquisitors' goals of justifying the harsh treatment of the group. However, modern historians should be cautious about accepting these claims at face value. The idea that the order was inherently violent has been repeated by many authors, including those who admire the group's progressive social ideals. But this view oversimplifies the history of the order. Early members, like Segarelli, were more focused on religious and spiritual reform, not violent revolution. The more radical and apocalyptic ideas associated with Dolcino emerged later, and even then, the violence may have been exaggerated by the Inquisition's records. By questioning these biases and examining new evidence, historians can gain a more accurate understanding of the order of apostles and their place in medieval history. Historians are people too, and their personal views can sometimes color the way they write about history. This is especially true when it comes to the story of Gerard Segarelli and Fra Dolcino, two religious leaders who lived in the 13th century. Their story is often seen through the lens of political and social movements, particularly by Marxist historians who have found in their lives and actions early examples of class struggle and rebellion against the powerful. Marxist historians, from the Soviet Union to East Germany to China, have often highlighted Dolcino and Segarelli as early champions of the underclass. They see the communal and anti-materialist society that Segarelli and Dolcino tried to create as a precursor to the ideals of communism. According to these historians, Dolcino's movement was not just a religious one, but a social revolution against the corrupt and materialistic church. For example, Antonio Labriola, an Italian socialist writing at the end of the 19th century, saw Dolcino's uprising as part of a long-term struggle by peasants against the church. Labriola believed that Dolcino's movement was driven by economic and social factors, even though he acknowledged the religious aspect. He saw the apostles fight against the church as a class struggle, where the peasants were rising up against the wealthy and powerful clergy. Labriola was not alone in this view. Skaskin, writing in Moscow during the Cold War, also saw Dolcino's movement as a class-based rebellion. Skaskin focused on the later, more violent years of Dolcino's leadership, ignoring the peaceful decades under Segarelli. He portrayed the apostles as a group that was always ready to fight against the bourgeois church, even though there is evidence that the order was initially peaceful and included people from various social classes. However, not all Marxist historians have ignored the religious and apocalyptic aspects of Dolcino's movement. Bernhard Topfer, a German historian, provided a more balanced view. Topfer recognized that the apostles' movement was rooted in their religious beliefs, particularly their commitment to apostolic poverty and their apocalyptic expectations. He noted that under Segarelli, the order was nonviolent and did not seek to break away from the church. Topfer also pointed out that the order's members came from various backgrounds, not just the lower classes. Topfer's work is significant because he considered the biases in the sources, such as the writings of Salembin, a critic of the order. Salembin often portrayed the apostles as uneducated and violent, but Topfer cautioned against taking these descriptions at face value. He emphasized that the order's peaceful beginning and diverse membership should not be overlooked. The region where Dolcino and his followers found refuge, Valsesia, was not the peaceful utopia that some historians have portrayed. It was a place with a history of violent territorial disputes and rebellions. The Valsesians had fought for their independence and autonomy for decades, and they were prepared to defend it when Dolcino arrived. The presence of inquisitors and crusaders, who were sent to suppress the apostles, only added to the tensions. When Dolcino and his followers came to Valsesia in 1304, they found a community that was already on edge. The Valsesians saw the apostles as allies in their struggle against the repressive forces of the church and feudal lords. The subsequent fighting, often described as a religious conflict, was likely more about defending their autonomy and rights than about religious doctrine. Some modern authors, like Frederick J. Baumgartner, have repeated many of the same misconceptions about Dolcino and the apostles. Baumgartner portrayed the apostles as inherently violent and anti-clerical, even though the evidence suggests otherwise. He also made claims about Dolcino's background and the order's activities that are not supported by historical sources. In contrast, Italian historians like Alberto Bassi and Grotto Merlo have provided a more nuanced understanding of the situation in Valsesia. They have highlighted the social and economic conditions that made the region ripe for rebellion. The Valsesians were already fighting to maintain their independence, and Dolcino's arrival simply added a religious dimension to their struggle. The story of Gerard Segarelli and Fra Dolcino is complex, and it cannot be reduced to a simple narrative of class struggle or religious fanaticism. Their movement was influenced by a mix of religious, social, and economic factors. While Marxist historians have provided valuable insights into the social conditions that shaped the apostles' actions, they have sometimes overlooked the religious and apocalyptic elements that were central to the movement. By considering both the religious and social aspects, as well as the specific context of Valsesia, we can gain a more complete and accurate understanding of the Apostles' movement. The story of Dolcino and his followers is a reminder that history is often more nuanced and multifaceted than it might initially appear. In the time between 1000 and 1250, Europe saw a significant shift in how people lived, worked, and governed themselves. After a long period of decline following the fall of the Roman Empire, cities began to grow once again. This growth was not just in size, but also in importance, as urban centers became the heart of new social and economic systems. After the fall of Rome, many cities in Europe were either abandoned or heavily controlled by local lords or bishops. However, as the threat of invasions by Vikings and Magyars decreased in the late 10th century, people started to return to these cities. The population grew, and with it came new opportunities and challenges. As more people moved into towns, the old systems of governance where bishops or lords had complete control became less effective. People wanted more freedom and rights. They wanted to be able to trade without paying excessive taxes, own property without fear of it being seized, and have a say in how their town was run. This led to a movement where townspeople began to negotiate with their rulers for charters that would grant them these freedoms. One famous example is the Charter of Loris, granted by King Louis VII in 1155. This charter allowed the people of Loris to live without fear of losing their property or paying unfair taxes. It also gave them the right to live in the town for a year and a day without being harassed. Similar charters were granted in other parts of Europe, such as in England, where kings like Henry I and John I gave towns like London and Ipswich the right to self-govern and trade freely. As towns grew, so did the economy. People started to make more money, and this new wealth created a gap between the ideal of apostolic poverty, where people lived simply and without much material wealth, and the reality of a society that valued wealth and luxury. This created tension, especially among religious groups who preached simplicity, but saw the world around them becoming increasingly affluent. In Italy, the movement toward self-governance was particularly strong. The Italian communes were alliances of townspeople who banded together to gain independence from their rulers. These communes were often formed by a mix of lesser nobles and merchants who wanted more control over their lives and their cities. The city of Milan, for example, became a powerful city-state where the people, not just the bishop or noble lords, made decisions. This new form of government, where consuls were chosen from different classes of society and replaced every year, was a significant change from the old systems where a single ruler had all the power. The rise of the communes had a profound impact on medieval society. It shifted power away from the traditional rulers, bishops, and nobles, and gave it to the people. This change was not always peaceful, and there were often conflicts between the old and new power structures. For instance, the Bishop of Lyon in France tried to prevent the formation of a commune in his city, but the people fought back and eventually won their rights. The communes also influenced the broader political landscape. The German emperor, who was often busy with other matters, found it difficult to control these independent city-states. This allowed the communes to grow and become powerful in their own right, shaping the future of Europe. The period from 1000 to 1250 saw a dramatic transformation in how people lived in urban areas. Towns grew, economies flourished, and new forms of government emerged. The Italian communes, in particular, showed how people could come together to create a more democratic and independent society. This period laid the groundwork for the modern urban and political systems we see today. As we journey through the vibrant tapestry of medieval European towns, we see a world in flux, where old orders are challenged and new ones emerge. The story of urbanization and the rise of trade is not just about wealth and commerce. It's about people, their struggles, and their triumph. In the beginning, towns were often under the rule of bishops or lords. But as trade grew, so did the power of the townspeople. This power shift was not always peaceful. For example, in one town, the people were so angry about their rights being taken away that they banded together, swore oaths, and took violent action against the bishop who had betrayed them. They stormed the bishop's palace, found him hiding, and executed him in a brutal manner. Though such violence was not the norm, it shows how deeply people felt about their rights and the lengths they would go to protect them. Across Europe, especially in France and Germany, similar stories played out. In Germany, the citizens of Cologne rebelled against their archbishop, who they felt was ruling them like a tyrant. They expelled him, showing that even in distant lands, the spirit of communal independence was strong. The heart of this transformation was money. As trade expanded, towns became wealthier. This wealth was not just a personal benefit. It changed the entire economic landscape of medieval Europe. Cities like Venice, Genoa, and Pisa grew rich from their trade with the East, particularly with the Byzantine Empire and the Muslim world. Venice, in particular, became a powerhouse, controlling a vast network of trading routes and bases. The Crusades further fueled this economic boom, as Italian cities provided crucial shipping and services to the Crusaders. The growth of trade had a profound impact on society. New social classes emerged, such as wealthy merchants and skilled artisans. These classes became the backbone of urban life, and their influence spread beyond the city walls. Trade fairs, like the famous Champagne fairs in France, brought people from different regions together, breaking down the isolation that had characterized the post-Roman world. Cities specialized in different trades, such as wool in England and cloth in Flanders, creating a web of economic interdependence. This new economy brought about significant changes in how people lived and worked. Time, once measured by the seasons or the church, became a commodity. Merchants needed precise clocks to regulate their business, leading to the invention of sophisticated timekeeping devices. This shift in how time was perceived and measured changed the way people thought about work and productivity. The rise of the bourgeoisie, a new class of wealthy urban dwellers, and the formation of guilds were other key developments. Guilds, initially formed to protect the interests of merchants and artisans, soon became powerful institutions that controlled trade and production. They set prices, regulated wages, and even governed the cities. However, over time, the wealthier merchants within the guilds began to dominate, leading to the formation of artisan guilds that represented the interests of the workers. These changes in urban life had far-reaching effects. They not only transformed the economic structure of medieval Europe, but also laid the groundwork for the modern world. The rise of towns and trade brought about a new sense of community, a new way of thinking about time and work, and a new class of people who shaped the future. As we look back on this period, we see a world that was constantly evolving, driven by the ambitions and struggles of its people. The medieval towns and their stories of commerce, conflict, and change are a testament to the human spirit and its ability to shape the world around it.